All right, so I'm going to explain this one last time, all right? We're going to go over how Haiti is mainly Igbo, okay? Haiti is mainly Igbo. I know there's a lot of people trying to say that, no, they're not mainly Igbo, they're this, they're that. No, we're going to talk about the connection between Igbo land and Haiti. We're talking about the Igbo island of Hispaniola, this right here. So you can send this to all of your Haitian friends and your Dominican friends. So this is what this is going to be about right here, this whole video. So in earlier videos, I described how the impact of war, the impact of the slave trade, and the impact of territorial disputes affected Biafra. Biafra is all of this in the red, okay? You have some important cities like Old Calabar here. You have Biafra, mainly Igbo land right here. But all of this, including the Edo people, Benin City, this close to the Yoruba. You see Abuja way up here, and you see Nigeria in a backed out view. And you have the Cameroon neighboring us. There are a lot of Igbos in the Cameroon, okay? So you have the Ibibio people. You also have the Igbo people here. You have the Edja people right here. So you see some of the linguistic representation of Igbo land. Not every single language, but they are represented. So again, we're going over how these people here became these people here. Okay, I'm going to get to Puerto Rico. I'm going to get to Cuba and Jamaica later. But right now, I'm going to talk about the island of Hispaniola. All right. So Haiti and Biafra have the same people, okay? Main Igbo mixes. So in 1804, Haiti had been completely conquered by the slaves that were taken here. 1804. In 1808, the Americans, in response to what happened in Haiti in 1804, decided to take the Igbos that they already had and sell them to the Caribbean, because the Haitians right here had put a stop to the Europeans being able to freely bring Africans from here all the way into here. So because Haiti in its location and its power had affected the Spaniards' ability to trade slaves in the Greater Antilles, the English, okay, that were up here in the South at the time, decided that, look, we're going to cut a deal with the Spanish so that the Spanish can continue to fill the slave trade slots that were being affected, because the Haitians, after winning against France, also won against the Spanish. Right now, we're going to get a close-up of the Spanish domination of the Caribbean. So at the time, the Spanish had control of a great deal of the islands. They controlled it via the slave trade economy. Once the Haitians had completely stopped the slave trade over the island of Hispaniola, that affected the ability for Cuba to get slaves, which affected the ability for Jamaica to get slaves, which affected the ability for all the islands to effectively translate the slaves from island to island. So then the Spaniards and the English come together about what to do about this. And this is where America itself shows its independence from England. By now, 1776 has passed, and these are independent Americans who are looking to make a name for themselves, so they gotta cut deals, they gotta work with other empires. So the first thing that they do on the eve of 1804 is they start to develop the intra-American slave trade. They were already producing a mass amount of Igbos. The reason why they didn't need England anymore is because they were already producing a massive amount of Igbo slaves in Virginia and spreading them across the states. So they didn't need to go to Africa anymore. They were birthing their own slaves here. And with the amount of Igbos that they had so many that they decided to open their own slave market in the Caribbean, in a response to the Haitians overthrowing the transatlantic slave trade. So this is why, this being the first black country after America to exist, is that influential when it comes with the history of Black America. It started on this island as far as Black America. The black people here are mainly Igbos here because these people here, as they died, were replaced by the Igbos coming from here. The Igbos coming from here are the same Igbos who eventually took over the entire island. They stopped the slave trade. Once the slave trade was stopped here, the Americans were able to sell even more Igbos to Cuba, which continued to trade slaves until 1888. So even though they banned the slave trade in 1808, it was the Atlantic slave trade that got banned and the intra-American in 1808 that began. This is how Cuba was continuously getting slaves until 1888. They were provided mainly from the Igbo crop here, much like the rest of the Caribbean. And I'm going to get to how Cuba also has a lot of Igbos. So Haiti put a stop to the transatlantic slave trade. The Igbos that put a stop to that were the Igbos that were constantly being traded from the Americas to replace the dying slaves and the dying labor on this island. So when you wonder, how are there so many Igbos in Haiti and how are there so many Igbo connections in this area? It's because these Igbos, that were being bred were the Igbos that were sent to the Caribbean to replace the Africans that were being killed over the Atlantic slave trade once they would arrive malnourished, too sick, having to do backbreaking labor in backbreaking environments, drowning, being poisoned, being killed for whatever reason, would eventually get replaced. Instead of having to take a 6-month trip all the way back, you would just take whatever short trip you had to come up to Florida, to come up to Georgia, to the Carolinas, and get you an Igbo and come right back. So as this worked for them for so many centuries, once the Haitians on Haiti destroyed the slave trade from coming into the island of Hispaniola, Cuba had to rely heavily on America to replace. Jamaica had to rely heavily on America. So even though the cultural impact of some of the other tribes in West Africa exists, they exist because the Igbo influences allowed it to. But we were led out of these things that were called the slave trade by the Igbos that were sent here from the Americas to replace the death rate that was extremely high. It was a high death rate. When you arrived to your slave plantation, you usually died very fast because the labor was going to kill. I'll tell you what you're going to do. Instead of going all the way back over here, you're going to go straight up here and get you an Igbo. This is how Haiti became overwhelmingly Igbo. Yes, they're mixed, but this is why you have Creole, because the Igbos here are Creolized Igbos. We are Igbo and something else, but mainly Igbo. The Americans here, we are Igbo and something else, but mainly Igbo genetically. Even though you have Yoruba ancestors, you're mainly Igbos. Most of the people coming here do not know this about themselves because our history isn't properly taught. This is why I could care less how they teach the history now, because it isn't like the American history is acknowledging the Igbo presence enough. We're just calling it a color, but we're really Igbo people. The Igbo slaves took over this island and put a stop to the slave trade, okay? The Igbos being bred here became the replacement because you don't want an adult that knows they should be free. You would rather take a baby that knows nothing, that was born into this. So the Igbos got to understand, how is it that there's so many connections to Igbo land in this place? Is because the Igbos were brought here, bred here, and then spread here, and the Igbo-ness will continue to spread. Do we understand what's going on now? Haiti is a realization of what Biafra was going to be, and look at what they did. They overtook the island, took 2/3 of it, and now they speak Spanish and they speak Creole, but they never left the island. This is still Igbo Island.